Welcome to the Outliers Podcast, celebrating the people, the skills, and the tools that create stories worth reading. A presentation of Outliers Writing University, where tomorrow's authors learn the craft.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers. Listen to me, I don't even know. Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series and our program, Get to Know. I'm your stumbling, bumbling host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my equally stumbling, bumbling co-host, Kathleen Antrim.
Thanks, Doug. It is so great to be here. And we've got a big treat for you today. We have a hugely award-nominated, award-winning author, Elizabeth Little. Welcome to Get to Know.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we love having you, and our viewers happen to know that I often like to put the authors on the couch. So I
love it. I'm ready.
I want to dig into your childhood. And one of the things that I would like to know, well, actually multiple things, it's a multi-part kind of digging in, is do you feel your childhood contributed to you becoming a writer? Did you have imaginary friends? Were you an introvert? Were you an extrovert? You know, athletics, no athletics? Did you read a lot? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an only child, and both of my parents were college professors. So that sort of sets the scene pretty well. And I was a very early reader. I started reading at 3. And
wow.
It's my earliest memory is I was at my daycare and I took Hop on Pop, which I really liked. And I'd never been able to read it before. I was just going to look at the pictures. And then I could just read it. Like I just opened this book and suddenly I could read it. And it was still to this day, the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. I peaked at 3. And from then on, you would never find me without a book. I was just reading constantly. And part of that was because I was an only child. And, so I had a lot of time to myself. And I had a house full of books because both my parents are huge readers. But also I was like a little bit of an awkward kid, and books were sort of like Linus's blanket for me. So
Sure.
I would never go anywhere without a book. My parents are still mad at me. We went on one huge vacation when I was a kid. It's like a European vacation, like really fancy, a really big deal for the family. And I spent a lot of time reading Nancy Drew books. And my parents still bring this up. What is it, like 37 years later? They're like, remember when we were in Switzerland and you were reading Nancy Drew? And I was like, yeah, it was great.
And they're like, but we wanted you to pay attention to Switzerland. So did you have imaginary friends? And if so, what were their names?
I didn't. I had cats. We always had cats. And I look back on this now and I'm vaguely horrified, but my parents never got them spayed or neutered. So we also always had kittens.
But that's kind of fun. But yeah.
So I had, like intense relationships with cats. My childhood cat was named Gobelino after this very obscure English children's book called Gobelino the Witch's Cat. And he was my best bud.
Oh, that's so cool. Oh my gosh. So take us through your journey here. So you're an avid reader. When did it, come to you that you might want to write? So let's start at high school. Okay, graduate high school and take us forward from there.
Yeah, English was my favorite class, and I loved the sort of mechanics of writing. My favorite thing to do in school was when they would give us I remember once we had an assignment where we had to try to write like Charlotte Bronte, write a paragraph that sounded like Jane Eyre. And that was like the most fun I'd ever had on an assignment. So I really loved, I knew I was into like grammar and languages and sort of technique, but I never once considered being a writer in high school. It just seemed like that was not something that people could really do. That just seemed so far out of my sphere of understanding.
Yeah.
I grew up in St. Louis and I didn't know I didn't know writers. I knew people who published like academic articles, but like that's a very different thing. And
Mhm.
so I like honestly, it didn't cross my mind. When I dreamt maybe of a writing career, it was writing like film criticism. That was,
Mm.
I was like, maybe I was like, I have a lot to say about movies. Maybe I could do that.
So when did that insane virus that, hey, I think I can write a novel, when did that
Yeah.
enter your brain and take over your existence?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so it started in college, and I was, this is like an insane thing that I had the opportunity to do. So I went to Harvard, and they had something called Let's Go travel guides, where students essentially were hired to be travel writers.
Oh, cool.
And we were absolutely, to be clear, we were not qualified to be doing this, but it was like an incredible opportunity because it was, they were published by St. Martin's. So not only were you expected to produce like professional quality writing, you were under a deadline. You ended up seeing the sort of whole production process. So, I learned so one year I was a writer, and then the next year I edited a guide. And that really, showed me the whole pipeline. Like I don't think I understood how you would even like write something before that.
I've
And what
never even heard of that, but what a valuable education.
Yes.
it was
Unbelievable.
unbelievable. And there were a couple of other, like Celeste Ng, who wrote, she was also a Let's Go person. Nicole Cliffy, who's like a big internet cool person, she was there. And yeah, it was invaluable because I spent a summer, like actually producing writing. And I think we all know that like to learn to write, you just have to write. And so I really, learned on the job, as it were. And then editing sort of introduced me to what like copy editing means and what developmental editing means. And so I started thinking about writing from that sort of POV, which also was hugely helpful in helping me to sort of understand craft, right? Basically, because I'd
Sure.
never
Yeah.
taken, like, I hadn't done any like fiction writing classes because that seems like it would be something for cooler, more artistic people than me. Um, But yeah, so the 2 years that I spent working for Let's Go was just an unbelievable education. And even if it's a different kind of writing than I do now, I mean, it still was just the volume I had to produce was.
So how did your first novel come about? What happened? Did you have an idea, make an outline, just sit down and start writing? How did you fall into that?
Yeah, so my first two books were actually nonfiction. I wrote two books about linguistics and sort of, because I've always really loved foreign languages, which is another thing I think has helped inform my English actually. But so I wrote two nonfiction books about like languages, non-English languages in the US and sort of how they've developed. But it was so hard. Nonfiction is so hard. I don't know how you do it. And I felt so in over my head at every moment and constantly, because publishers don't fact check for you, so it's all on the writer. And I took that really, really, really to heart. So I was just working so hard to try to do my best and always feeling like I was not quite coming in at the level that I wanted to. And so after my second nonfiction book was published, I was like, I don't know, should I try? Should I try fiction? I loved novels, but it just seemed like something, again, out of reach, like something that I guess I always thought of myself as like a practical person. And, I never felt like an artsy person growing up.
I'm so glad that you're saying this because this is so important. I think so many new or aspiring writers feel this way.
Yeah,
I think it's a very common thing, and I think it's important for them to hear that, pretty much everybody starts there,
yes.
So thank you for
Yeah,
that.
it feels like I mean, it is a dream in a lot of ways, but it can feel so out of reach. And I think particularly before social media, when like
Mhm.
I didn't engage with any writers. Now it feels a little more like I can see the humans behind it in a way that I could.
Sure.
Right.
And so that's nice. But again, like I was
So
like,
tell
well,
us about the first book. How did that come about? And
Yeah.
how did
yeah.
you approach it? And what was your process at that time?
So I knew I wanted to write a mystery because that was always my favorite genre. I loved, like I said, Nancy Drew. That was the gateway drug to, Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers, and all of that. And it really did, it came to me in sort of like a log line. And I was thinking about the Amanda Knox case. And
Ooh,
I
yeah.
think maybe it was the same time that she was released. Because I think what it was is I saw a CNN news alert on my phone saying that she'd been released. And I just started thinking, like, how do you go back to your life after that? Not just after having been through an experience like that, but when the whole world has a really set opinion, they think they know you, they think they know what you did or didn't do. And sort of like, how do you even go on after that? And it was a little bit of beginner's luck, I will say, because in the years since then, when I've tried to sort of like recapture, try to figure out like what's an idea that I can move forward on, or what's an idea that just needs to either go back in the drawer or just keep percolating for a couple of years. And with that one, I just like ran with it. But now I can look back and really what I think made it a great idea to go on is it was like a story engine that immediately started generating plot lines and potential scenes. And it sort of like sparked my imagination in a way that I immediately had material to draw from. Since then, I've had other ideas for books that seemed cooler from the start, like maybe really high concept. But when it came to actually seeing things play out behind my eyes, it just didn't catch. It was sort of like blood from a stone. So in retrospect, I just think I got really lucky. But once that idea was in there, it was in there. And I think I just started writing and the voice came to me right away. And she's a really strong voice. My mother-in-law hates it. She loves she's like, you're such a good writer. I just hate that character so much. So we're crossing our fingers that she might like this one.
Are you a pantser or an outliner, or what's your process?
I started off as a pantser for sure. That first book was like all id. It was just, I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, well, we'll just figure it out. Obviously, it helped that I had read so much because I think that structure gets in there. And especially now, I think readers are so thoughtful and intelligent about structure and tropes and mechanics in a way that I really wasn't starting out. Because, I think the internet has brought a lot of like wonderful like resources so you can like eavesdrop almost on these craft discussions and understand it on a level that I certainly didn't when I was starting out. But it really just kind of vomited out of me in a way I've never been able to replicate. And, I think looking back on it, you can feel the pantsiness of it a little bit, but I think the voice was strong enough to carry it through the sort of like rougher edges. Now I write very differently. Now I take a very, very strong structural framework from the beginning. I do diverge from that sometimes, but I always start from like a 5-act structure. I actually took something I read about in a guide to writing TV pilots. And so those are often 5 acts because that's when the commercial breaks are, or used to be.
Right.
And I found that more helpful than a 3-act structure because it was more specific about that big middle section that I think we all have trouble with. And identifying the strong sort of midpoint turn where really all the stakes are ratchet it up. Everything becomes more important. There's a big turn that sort of
That's the key to a story.
yeah,
Is
and
the midpoint.
it is absolutely
Absolutely.
the midpoint. And I think when I was reading, sort of other craft guides, that second act was left a little bit more like, oh, you'll figure it out. Loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I was
I'm
always
glad you said that. I've always said every novelist should take a couple of screenwriting classes or read books. Not that you necessarily want to follow the structure. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But it lets you know that there is one. There is a framework, and it makes you see things a little differently. And if you want to write a screenplay, it's really easy to write. It's very hard to write a good one, but it's really easy to write a screenplay. You
Yeah.
can do it. There's software that'll help you do it. Bang, bang, bang. And it's fun. And it's
Yes.
an educational process.
Yeah,
But
it
it's
is
totally
fun.
different than novel writing.
Because you get to like cut out a lot of fat in a screenplay.
Exactly.
And sometimes you need that feeling of moving forward, of accomplishing
Momentum.
something.
Exactly.
Exactly. So that really, I like that you said that, because I live in Los Angeles and I moved here because my husband used to be a filmmaker. And moving here, obviously, like I was then immersed in a different kind of writing culture than I was when I was living in New York, and people were talking about things in a totally different way
Right.
than I was used to. And, it's not always the way I like to write, and it's not always useful. Sometimes I hear things about how studios work or how notes are given, and I'm like, well, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. But
On
getting
the other side, Lee Goldberg says that if he's getting ready to start a book, he'll just write the screenplay.
that
But,
makes sense.
he came from movie, TV,
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so for him, writing a screenplay is natural. But that's his outline now.
I think, and I
And then he
remember
writes the novel from
I
there.
remember Lane Fargo also mentioning something like this. She wrote that wonderful, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the title of it. I'm so sorry. But it's a sort of like thriller about pairs ice skating, which is fantastic. And she said that she would always write through like a screenplay as well. And then you get the dialogue, you get the sort of like, you get to feel really organically where those characters are going to go. And then you can build around it.
Yeah, put meat on the bone. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Well, let's talk about this. Speaking
Yeah,
of,
tell us about this.
I'm going to tell you, I told you earlier
Cool.
before we started, I'm reading this now. I'm about halfway through, and this is insane. And you seem so normal. But this is snarky and sarcastic and fun and filled with characters and chaotic, and I don't see an outline here at all. That's why I'm surprised that this wasn't pantsed. But go ahead, tell us about it.
Yeah. So basically, my first two novels were, I think they fell pretty firmly in the sort of literary thriller area, which is just like a normal thriller, but sometimes the words are longer, right? Like, I don't think it actually is any different from a normal thriller. It's just how it was packaged by the publisher.
Right.
But there is kind of, it was just kind of bumming me out, the sort of general storylines that I was reading, the things I was writing. It was, the height of domestic thrillers. And there's so many great books in that genre, but I was like, I don't want to read about someone's terrible husband anymore. And like, I don't want to read about like a terrible marriage or like someone's child dying. It was so dark. And, especially coming out of the pandemic, I was like, I kind of want to write something a little bit less realistic, a little bit, I want to say silly almost.
Serendipity. There's a lot of serendipity involved.
Lighter.
That's fun. Yes.
Exactly. And so instead of writing a sort of thriller, I decided to write what's more like a chaotic action movie.
Yes.
And I wanted it to have like lots of big set pieces, sort of big ensemble cast, and I wanted it to be escapist, right? I wanted it to be escapist in that fun, like aspirational way. Like, I wanted my readers to imagine, like, what would it feel like if I knew how to like fight hand to hand with someone and like beat them? Like, what would that feel like, as opposed to the feeling that we so often have in mystery novels, which is that you're relating to the dread, you're relating to the lack of safety. So instead, I wanted to let them feel what it would be like to be, instead of a target, to be a weapon. And that's kind of the defining theme for me with this.
Did you outline this?
I did outline it, and then I threw out that outline. And I think I'm thinking about the next book in the series now, and I can already see it so much more clearly than I did with this one. And it's a different genre for me. This one was, and I underestimated how hard an action thriller actually is, because there's so much that you have to get right in terms of the tradecraft, because the reader's really looking for that.
And comedy.
And exactly.
Comedy is so personal.
Exactly.
That you're sitting there, because I write, a comedic series, and you sit there and you write something. I say, this is funny, but is anybody else going to think it's funny?
Exactly. Yeah. There were times when I was like, I'm writing this for an audience of one, and that audience is me.
Exactly. And if you're a stand-up comedian, you're dying when people are leaving the room.
Right.
If you're writing comedy on the page by yourself, you're in there laughing, and the cat's looking at you like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
Somebody else might think, well, that's silly. That's stupid.
Yeah. So give us a log line of this book.
Yeah, I love the cover too.
Yeah, the cover is really cool, isn't it? So this is about Juno Hardwick, an ex-Marine who moves to Los Angeles and starts working for a high-end celebrity security agency. And she thinks she's going to be bored out of her mind. She thinks she's just going to be watching red carpets and, following starlets around. But she ends up falling into what amounts to like a much larger conspiracy that involves her past, her friends, and ends in pretty like explosive fashion, I think.
And a wild cast of characters.
Yes, it is.
Well, where can people get this? Where can they find you, find out more about you, and buy the book?
The book is going to be available everywhere on August 4th,
right.
4th. I always want to say the 3rd. I don't know why. So you can find it at your local independent bookseller or Amazon, of course, and bookshop.org. And you can find out, I don't have a huge online presence, but you can find out more about me on my website, which is elizabeth-little.com. But you'll probably find out the most about me by just reading the book. There's a lot of me folded in there, even though I am definitely not an ex-Marine.
Well, in which case you're a dangerous person. But I love it. I love the quirkiness of this book. It's just so much fun. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right up my alley.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for being on Get to Know, and we're going to have you back. Absolutely. You're great.
My gosh, this was so much fun. And you just saw my cat wander through. Maybe next time I can get them to join us.
Well, we're getting the back of him walking out.
Yeah.
But
it was so much fun, and it's really wonderful to hear the way that you're helping to sort of make writing more accessible for everyone. Because for me, it really didn't feel accessible, but I was lucky enough to have this like crazy opportunity at a school I was crazy lucky to get to go to. But I wish everyone had that opportunity, right? I think they can more and more now that the sort of internet is democratizing things. And I just think that's the best.
Well, that's what we try to do at Outliers is, bring along the next generation, because we're selfish. We want to read the books.
Right? Yeah. Right? I love that. There's nothing better than discovering
exactly.
a new author.
Well, I feel that way about you.
Oh, thank you.
Because I thoroughly enjoy this. And we appreciate you being here. Thanks a lot.
Oh, absolutely. This has been so much fun. Thank you.
Well, as our viewer and listeners know, we will be back with other shows down the road, other interviews, and lots of fun. So until then, keep writing, keep reading, keep having fun, and Kathy?
Don't get caught.
Don't get caught.
The Outliers Podcast is a copyrighted presentation of Outliers Writing University. All rights reserved. Learn more at outlierswritinguniversity.com.